Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome back to another episode. So for this episode, I will be sharing with you guys another reminder from the book that we've been reading, but I'll also be sharing a Quran ayah with you that I was reading last night in another different book, and I'll tell you how it all connects, and it was really interesting. So this one says, keep remembering the destructor of desires. Abu Hurairah narrated that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, remember the destructor of desires, i.e. death. He also narrated that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, whoever wrongfully takes a span of the hand from a land, Allah will order him to dig it down to the seventh earth, and then he will fence it on the day of judgment until he judges between people. It was also narrated by Abu Hurairah that I heard the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, said, a person may utter a word that he thinks is harmless, but it results in his falling in hellfire, the depth of 70 years in travel. Now, this is a very frequent one that I think a lot of people might have heard, that, remember the destructor of desires, which is death, and how you can, build this whole life for yourself on earth, and then you'll die, and then, that's the end of that. And I know that this is one that comes up very, very often. But I always feel like it's a nice reminder, especially in this month, because a lot of times in Ramadan, people kind of forget and are kind of more isolated and away from the worldly chases, from the worldly things. And I'll tell you a little connection. So I read this book last night, right? Before I read this book, I was reading another book. Like an hour earlier, I read this book because I like to read this book before bed. I was reading this book and it mentioned this Quran ayah, which was 102, one of the Quran. And the Quran ayah said, competing with each other in worldly increase diverts you. And that for some reason just smacked me like an arrow in my heart. And it all just kind of clicked. And I feel like anyone who does anything competitive in their day-to-day life, like if you go to a competitive school, competitive program, you have a lot of rigorous things go on in your life, you know that competitiveness and that desire to always make the cut, to always excel, it really consumes you. I'll actually tell you, I had one of my cousins recently visit me. Well, two of my cousins. I had my cousins recently visit me. And me and my cousin, we are chatterboxes. Like when we're together, we're just not gonna shut up. Like it's just like that. Growing up, she's a little bit younger than me, so growing up, it was like we never really had like that close of a connection. But then after like we actually moved, our connection got better. And every time she comes and visits me, we're just like, Pookie, lock the door. This is our time. Like, we just sit there, bro, for hours. Like, almost every day, for hours, we just sat there on the floor, just talking, like, about everything. Just trauma dumping, dropping the lore, as she says, just dropping it all, right? And she's always doing something really competitive, mashallah. But she was sharing to me how, at times, this competitiveness has crushed her, and she sometimes thinks, how Allah, how there's that kind of that saying that like if Allah's given you everything in this life, then you should be worried about what you have in the next. And mind you, like she's not, someone who doesn't pray, who isn't aware of her relationship with Allah. No, she is. She's very mindful of her relationship with Allah. She prays and whatnot. But despite that, she was just mentioning to me that like, it's like sometimes this competitiveness, this worldly life, it diverts you away. And so last night when I read that Quran ayah, it hit home for me because so many times, I think even I can say I'm guilty as charged, where sometimes you'll think that like, yeah, I'm focusing on my deen, but you'll also have 100 other things that you're doing daily. And it's not wrong to do those things. It's just that often, since you have so much to do and you get so burnt out and you have so many things that you need to attend to, we often start to lose that guilt in our heart when we stop doing like the religious things we used to do. So, like, for example, on a scale outside of prayer and fard, let's say, you had a habit every day of trying to memorize Allah's 99 names. And because you got so busy competing in worldliness, increasing in wealth, school, whatever it might be, slowly but surely you stop doing it. And it's normal. Everyone has busy weeks, busy times where things are just a little bit chaotic. But slowly you start to even lose a conscious thought that like, oh, that's something I should do. Or you start to lose the guilt of it. I remember this was one of the hikmas in the Kitab al-Hikam, I believe. It was something among those natures. And I found it very interesting because over time that is what happens. It starts off with something that you're like, oh, it's okay. It's okay if I don't do it today. It's okay if I don't do it tomorrow. Then like you start to lose the guilt for it. You start to forget that feeling. And now I'm not saying to drown yourself in guilt on doing voluntary acts, right? That's not what we're saying. But what we're saying is that you should always, whatever you pick up, I always think this, whatever you pick up, do it well, do it nice, and do it consistently. And of course, if you're not able to do something voluntary, like a voluntary act, don't drown yourself in guilt for it. But don't completely neglect it and forget it out of your mind either. I'll also tell you another story. I knew a resident doctor. He was from Palestine, and I'm not talking like, oh, he was born in Palestine, he came to the US at a young age. No, this man is from Palestine. Like, he's been in the US for like, I don't even know, barely a year or two. He's from Palestine. Like, he is English till this point. He's still learning English, okay? And he's doing great at it. It's just that he's from Palestine through and through. And so when he came to the US, he had a really hard time adjusting to just, everything. And he was shadowing and learning from some doctors, doing different things, whatever. And time came, and it was his last shift, and it was like a whole little goodbye thing. We took little pictures with the doctors, all that, and he was going back to Palestine. And if you are even slightest bit aware of what's going on in Palestine right now with the genocide going on, he was like, I still want to go back because that's home. So it's like he's a doctor in Palestine, but of course when you come to the US, things convert out differently. So it's like the bigger purpose for him is there. And I always think about that because, it lives in my head rent free because, when you're in a safer place, like theoretically, right? Like right now you're in the US and you're in a much significantly safer place, right? You're not having bombs dropped on you, whatever. And your heart still longs to go back home, right? It's not longing to increase in your worldly wealth here where you are, where it's safe. You want to go back home and, help someone, help those people that are going through it. It always hits home. And I always think about it, how like there's some people that when they pick up a certain career, they embody that and they do it very well. But all of this tends to bring me back and reminds me that like it's okay to go and want to strive to become a doctor, want to strive to become something, but let's not forget our greater cause, our greater reasoning. Let's not forget that we shouldn't allow these things, these desires that come with achieving new positions to make us go astray and away from what our real purpose is. And of course, if you're someone that wants to worship Allah and live a life of purpose, you try your best to serve the people. You try your best to take care of the people. You try your best to help and unload people's burdens because you know that that's going to, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for that. And so that's what I'm saying. Like whatever you pick up in your life, know that you will have desires. You're going to have desires anywhere you go in life with whatever you pick up, right? Like if you even got like a really big business, you're going to desire to grow this business even more. But let's not forget that you should also be giving money to charity and, zakah and things among that nature. Let's not forget that there are some rights of your family, whatever, that you should be fulfilling. Like some people, they decide that they want to pick up a career to help people. That's great. And then over time, the more successful you get, the more money you get, things just become about money, money, money. Let's not forget what you started. Every single little thing that you do can be beneficial for you, of course, through intention and through, that deep desire to help people for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, intention, of course, it can be very beneficial. But often our desires kind of wave in within our intentions. And they I guess you could say kind of braid in. They just kind of braid in. Our desires kind of start to braid in with our intentions until our intentions are slowly taken out of the picture and then we lose them. So whatever you do, whatever you desire in your life, put a good intention behind it and make sure that your desires do not, take you away from Allah. They don't drive you to a point where you are so consumed in this world because all desires are eventually destroyed by death. Hope you guys like this reminder. Take care of yourself. Assalamu alaikum.